count and elapsed time as Martin goes around. He'll also be having his timing provided by Frank, I believe, on an iPad. That will be showing his average time for the previous lap, his average time for the event so far, and his elapsed time. Looks like they have some backup wheels there ready to go. Other folks you see around the track are officials from the Mexican Cycling Federation. They're in the light blue shirts. We have some local expert photographers, including some from the Aguascalientes State Institute of Sport, which is here in support of the event. They manage this beautiful facility and have been providing lots of support for Martin as he gets ready for the race. The facility has recently been refurbished. The track has been sanded and refinished, and the team has been working mightily over the last few days to make sure that all the dust is cleaned up and it's in perfect condition for Martin's ride. We're looking at his Argon 18 bike with Walker Brothers wheels. I'll be telling you a little bit more about his equipment choices. We see a Dash saddle there, ready to ride. Time to remove the ice vest. Okay, here we go. Martin already has the pedals set in his preferred position for a good, strong start. Track cyclists can practice for years perfecting their start technique. It's not the most important part of the hour, unlike other shorter track events, because it's such a minuscule percentage of the race. Nonetheless, it can be nerve-wracking, and it's good to get off to a good, solid start and feel comfortable and get settled in and up to speed as quickly as possible. Of course, once Martin gets off and going, they'll pull away that start gate and clear the lane for him to come through after his first lap. Just making sure his skin suit is in the perfect position for comfort and aerodynamics. You can see the name of his team's title sponsors, one of them, BHS Logistics, there on the side of his skin suit. He's heard a warning beep, so the countdown has begun. And he's off. Martin Toft Madsen off on his attempt at the UCI World Hour Record. He appears to be off to a solid start. You can see there the sponges that are marking the out of bounds to make sure that he takes the legal way around the track. That 26.5-second lap will not be the lap time that he's shooting for, but his schedule allows for him to have a few extra seconds on the start as he gets up to speed. I'll be telling you more about his goal pace and his progress as we move along. Already you can see Martin's outstanding aerodynamic position. In fact, for most of the lap, you can see right there, he's not looking ahead, he's looking down at the track to keep his head in the most aerodynamic position. He does look up in the corners in order to navigate them safely. And also he has his coach Frank positioned in just the perfect position in one of those corners so that as he looks up, he will see Frank holding the iPad that shows his elapsed time, his lap speed, and his average speed over the distance so far. Martin has not been riding on the track very long, only since 2016 when he started training for the hour record, but he already knows how to maintain an excellent line, keeping his bike down, especially in the corners where it's critical to do that, more important than in the straights. And a deviation from that black line over the course of an hour can cost riders laps depending on how poorly they navigate it. So that's something to pay attention to. With some riders, it deteriorates over the course of the effort as they get tired and lose concentration. So we'll see if that's a problem for Martin so far. He appears to be right on line. Let me take a moment to properly introduce myself. As I said at the start, I'm Molly Van Houweling. I'm really excited to be here providing the English language commentary for today's event. I'm here in part because nearly 3 years ago, I broke the women's hour record right here in Aguascalientes. My record has since been broken by Australian Bridie O'Donnell and American Evelyn Stevens, and that's really part of the fun and thrill of this event. You try to write yourself into the record books with the realization that they'll be written again, and you'll be part of the storied and never-ending history of the hour record, one of cycling's legendary events. That record has been held by the most decorated cyclists in history, including Eddy Merckx and Jeannie Longo. I'll have more to say about that history in a bit. As it happens, Mexico has an important part to play in it, and so does Martin's home country of Denmark. But right now, let's focus on him, the man of this hour, Martin Toft Madsen. I'll let you watch him as he settles in, and I'm going to take a look at his schedule and see how he's doing on his goal time. By my calculations, Martin is just ahead of schedule, almost hitting perfectly his goal schedule for the number of laps covered so far. He has a schedule that accounts for the difference in the initial lap and then gives him a goal lap time and speed. His pacing plan is to hit 54.7 kilometers an hour once he's up to speed, and to keep that pace steady throughout most of the race. He says he hopes maybe in the end, after 40 minutes or even more, he might have the energy to pick it up a bit, of course, to pick it up a bit if he has to, if he's lost some time by then. But his goal primarily is to keep it pretty steady. And that will be about 16.5-second laps around this 250-meter track. By my calculations, he's still a tiny bit ahead of schedule. Let me tell you more about the man of the hour, Martin Toft Madsen. He's a 33-year-old engineer, full-time engineer who races in his spare time on the weekends for the European Continental team from Denmark, BHS Almborg Bornholm team. His assistant director, Sportif Simon, is here trackside. You saw him helping get the bike loaded into the start gate. Simon tells me the team is a small, modest continental team that was pleasantly surprised when one of its riders emerged over the past few years as Denmark's leading time trial specialist. In fact, Martin recently won his third straight Danish National Time Trial Championship. In 2017, he also won the Chrono des Nations, one of the most prestigious time trials on the world calendar. He's finished second and third at the time trial at the Tour of Denmark. In fact, that race is coming up next week, and Martin's plan is for that to be the next race on his schedule. Martin's only been racing for about 10 years and only started riding the track, as I mentioned, in 2016 in preparation for his first attempt on the Danish Hour Record. He broke that record in January of this year with a distance of 52.324 kilometers at the Bellerup Super Arena Velodrome in Denmark. Again, his goal today is the Wiggins record of 54.527 kilometers. I think what we can see on the screen is his average speed so far, which isn't to that mark, but of course that's not accounting for his start lap. So what we can expect to see is for that average to get closer and closer to his goal as he racks up the laps at his goal pace. Now, Martin's record in Denmark is 52.324 kilometers. In Denmark is 52.324 kilometers, while Brad Wiggins' record in London is 54.526. So that's more than 2 kilometers. 0.526. So that's more than 2 kilometers faster than Martin has gone at his best for the world record today. Faster than Martin has gone at his best for the world record today. So I asked Martin, who again is an engineer, he's trained in physics and nanotechnology. I asked him why such a smart guy is an engineer, he's trained in physics and nanotechnology. I asked him why such a smart guy thinks that this record is attainable over 2K farther than he's gone before. So when I put that question to Martin, he gave me kind of a blank look as if I should know the explanation, which in short is math and science and physics. He knows he's almost 2.5 kilometers short at his best so far, but he also knows that one can get, many people say, 1 to 2 kilometers simply by going to altitude, a high altitude track like this one here at Aguascalientes. So that meant that he would need less than 0.5 kilometer potentially of gains in terms of training and equipment. And he figured that in the 6 months or more from January until his summer race date that he might be able to make those gains. And in fact, he says he has made gains based on training and equipment in that time. And so he seems cautiously optimistic about his chances today, and his coach Frank does as well. Now, some people are surprised to learn that athletes can make speed gains at altitude, given that most of us feel out of breath and kind of sick when we come to altitude if we're used to living at sea level. But in fact, because of the thinner air at altitude, we can move faster even if we're suffering aerobically from the altitude. Robert Chung, who's an aerodynamics expert based in Berkeley, a part-time aerodynamics expert. He's also a demographer at Berkeley, which is my home campus back in California. He's calculated and based on science that he's observed that 7% is the theoretical maximum gain based on altitude alone at this level, even apart from other factors, including other atmospheric factors. Now, that's the theoretical maximum. It depends, of course, on how the athlete reacts to altitude and how well they've acclimatized. Frank Jacobsen, the coach for Martin, says that he reacts well to altitude and that they've done careful preparation, including living in an altitude tent while home in Denmark, and also training this summer in Livorno, Italy, to prepare and train at altitude for the event, in addition to arriving early to Aguascalientes to get used to the particular atmospheric conditions here. So let's check in and see how Martin is looking. He has over 10 minutes down in his effort so far. Martin tells me that the first 15 to 20 minutes should feel easy. If it doesn't feel easy, it means that you've gone out too hard, and that's certainly my own experience as well in my hour record attempts. And then after 20 minutes or so, you start to feel it. He says his experience is that the second 20 minutes of the effort are the hardest, from 20 to 40 minutes, when you can't, the end is not yet in sight, but you're starting to feel the effort. That's when it really takes some concentration. And then, if all's going well, it can start to feel a little better after 40 minutes, and that's the time when Martin says he might consider picking up the pace. But if you've really been at the edge up until then, he says it cannot start to feel easier until the very end. Martin says for him that's been as late as 8 minutes to go. In my experience, sometimes I didn't feel better until 2 minutes to go, and sometimes I never felt better. Sometimes I suffered like I never had before until the end. So let's hope for the best, just the right amount of suffering for Martin Toft Madsen to get his goal of the hour record today. Some of you watching may have watched other recent hour record attempts. There have been a lot of them recently. In fact, there have been 8 men and 5 women to attempt to beat the UCI hour record in recent years, since the UCI updated the regulations in 2014 to permit the use of aerodynamic bikes, all bikes complying with the rules governing bikes used in endurance competitions on the track. So pursuit bikes, in other words, can now be used in this event, and all of the advantages that come with that prompted lots of riders to think that they had a shot at the hour record. Riders like Jens Vogt, who was the first to try it on the men's side, Sarah Story, who was the first to try it on the women's side, and myself. I thought I'd give it a go and was ultimately successful here in Aguascalientes. As I said, the women's record has since been broken by Bridie O'Donnell from Australia and the current record holder, Evelyn Stevens from the United States. The men's record has since been broken by Matthias Brandl of Austria, Rohan Dennis of Australia, Alex Dowsett of Great Britain, and most recently Brad Wiggins of Great Britain. And that's the record that Martin is going after today. We have some upcoming attempts on the calendar as well. Another man and another woman will be attempting the hour record later this summer, and I hope to find some time later in the broadcast to tell you about those attempts. Martin still seems to be focusing really well on his line, which looks great. His aerodynamics, putting his head down there and just looking up in the corner. He's sitting way forward on his saddle. You can also see the interesting way he holds his hands to maximize his aerodynamics. Sounds like we can hear some encouragement coming from the sidelines there, likely from Simon and Frank. "17 and a half minutes down. That means he's getting close to finishing what he thinks of as the easy first third of the ride, entering the difficult second third. Still looks like he's slightly ahead of schedule. I've told you a little bit about the recent history of the hour record, including many attempts since the rules were changed in 2014. But the hour record has a much longer history than that, and a storied one. As I mentioned, it includes both Denmark and Mexico. As for Denmark, Ole Ritter from Denmark broke the record in Mexico City in 1968. So that combines our two countries of the day. Eddy Merckx, the famed Belgian, broke Ole Ritter's record again in Mexico City in 1972. Ritter returned to Mexico City to try to get his record back with 2 attempts in the same week in 1974. The first was disrupted by windy conditions at the outdoor velodrome there in Mexico City, so he tried again, but fell short again. And those attempts are documented in a documentary movie called The Impossible Hour, which I highly recommend if you're a real hour record or cycling aficionado. Martin says he's met Ole Ritter, who attended Martin's attempt in Denmark, and he admires the Dane both for his hour record success and for his all-around success as a cyclist, including riding the Giro d'Italia 9 times. Ritter was also a 6-day track rider later in his career. But Martin admits, despite the home country similarity, that his favorite hour record rider, the one with whom he associates most closely, is Graham O'Brien, who was, like Martin, a real time trialing and hour record specialist who had much the same philosophy, kind of an underdog philosophy, doing things independently his own way and really focusing on optimizing his equipment and position. I can tell from talking to Martin that his training in engineering and physics and his work in that field really informs how carefully and methodically and scientifically he thinks about optimizing all of his equipment. So he's been working carefully with his equipment providers and his coaches and advisors to perfect all of that. And all of that goes into his optimism for the ambitious task of trying to beat Brad Wiggins' record today. Let me tell you a little bit more about that really methodical training that Martin has put into this effort. Of course, a lot of it has been training that he's had to fit in with his full-time job. I asked how that's possible, and he says part of it is training during his commute, a 30-kilometer commute each way from home to work, which he does even in the winter in Denmark, so that helps to keep him fit all year round. In summer, when the days are longer, he also trains after work, taking the longer route home, he tells me, so that his training adds up for more hours every day. As for training on the track, he says he doesn't do it much. He goes to the track mostly for testing and does that on average about 2 to 3 times per month. He's been doing, of course, especially hard and specialized training in preparation for the hour record, but nonetheless, he says that in many ways has been the easy part because he's used to training. What he's not used to doing is dealing with all of the logistics involved in setting up an hour record attempt in faraway Mexico, which includes, of course, getting all of his equipment organized and ready for travel, getting approvals from the UCI and from both the Danish and Mexican cycling federations, getting things set up like the timing, this broadcast, the drug testing, and everything that goes everything else that goes on to putting on a serious race like this. He says that as a bike racer on a continental team, he's used to getting his bike ready, but as he says, he's not used to hosting the race himself, which is what it kind of feels like given all of the logistics that have to be put together for this race. He says usually, in fact, the bigger and more important the race is, the less you have to do. At a race like the World Championships, the organizers take care of almost everything. You don't have to arrange, of course, the timing, the testing, and everything else. You just have to show up and ride your bike. But he's been having to put in instead months of preparation on all aspects of the logistics for this race, which isn't to say that he hasn't had lots of help, which he has had, as I've mentioned, from his home federation in Denmark, the Mexican Cycling Federation, the UCI, the State Institute of Sport here in Aguascalientes, and the local staff, including Juan Esparza, who's been helping to coordinate everything. I'll be mentioning some other specific helpers along the way, and also some of the equipment sponsors that have been helping him perfect all of that. Now, another part of the preparation that Martin's been putting in is preparing to be here at altitude. I mentioned that a little bit. He tells me he spent 3 weeks in an altitude tent at home in Denmark before going to Livigno, Italy for 2 weeks at the start of this month, then going back to Denmark for just 3 days at home before coming here to Aguascalientes. He said the first couple days here were a little hard, but he figures that might be the travel as much as the altitude. His coach, Frank, is an expert on altitude preparation and how to perfect the protocol for the tent and the altitude training to get as ready as possible for an effort like this. Now, all of these considerations about the logistical difficulties, the altitude, and so forth went into Martin's decision to nonetheless travel to Aguascalientes all the way from Denmark to make the attempt here. He explained to me that there aren't that many tracks in the world that have the perfect combination of high altitude and a good, fast track surface, and Aguascalientes has that combination. At other tracks around the world, they can be very fast in the perfect atmospheric conditions if the atmospheric pressure is exactly right on the day, for example. But he didn't want to go into a race knowing that everything came down to exactly what the conditions would be on the day. He described imagining a situation where the air pressure was wrong and a reporter asked him the morning of the attempt whether he thought he was going to make it, and he'd have to be honest and say no, because the air pressure isn't ideal for my attempt. He didn't want to set himself up for that kind of effort, and his coach Frank said he wasn't signing up for that either. So Martin decided to go somewhere where the conditions would be more reliably fast because they were set in large part by the altitude as opposed to the daily conditions, and so that contributed to his decision to come here to Aguascalientes. Now, the daily conditions do make a difference even here. Again, in theory, it's better if the temperature is higher and the pressure is lower. Now, that's only in theory, because the temperature makes a difference for the athlete's physiology as well. And so at least for a long effort like the hour, you wouldn't want it to be as hot as possible, but Martin was hoping for an average temperature in the 80s today. It's only in the 70s outside, and I bet it's not yet in the 80s in the track, and it's been overcast for most of the morning, but it does seem to have been heating up. So maybe by the time we get to the end, he'll have had close to the conditions that he was hoping for over the course of his ride. And maybe if it's a little cool, Martin will excel in terms of his power output based on his being used to cooler temperatures back home in Denmark. More encouragement from the sidelines there. We're coming up on almost the halfway point. We see Frank with exactly what Martin is seeing. And Frank's reaction to the most recent lap. As we close in on the halfway point, I'm going to take a short break in the broadcast and see if I can go check in on the sidelines. I won't give you an interview with Frank, who's busy right now, but I'll get a sense of how the advisors are feeling, and then I'll come right back and report back about how things are going for Martin and his team as we enter the second half of his attempt on the UCI Hour Record. Hi cycling fans, it's Molly Van Houweling back with you in Aguascalientes at the Velodromo Bicentenario, watching Martin Toft Madsen try to break the UCI Hour. I'm a little out of breath because although I'm here in Aguascalientes at the Velodrome, I'm not in fact trackside where I can get all of the data that Martin's advisors have. Instead, I'm in a sound booth just on the outside of the Velodrome, separated from the track. So a little frustrated by what I can see with you folks here on our computer screens. I just sprinted inside to see what the advisors say about whether Martin is in fact on top of the schedule that he drafted for himself for beating Brad Wiggins' record. Only 3 to 4 seconds behind his planned schedule, so about a quarter of a lap of this 250-meter track behind schedule. Maybe that's why we saw the frowny face from his coach Frank on the side of the track a few minutes ago. That tells me a couple things. It tells me, one, that Martin's probably feeling like he's on the edge of what he can do, because otherwise he'd be picking up the pace and staying on his schedule. It also tells me that of course he'll be trying to pick a final third of the race. And finally, it tells me that that's going to be hard because he's already feeling on the rivet. And so it'll be hard for him to pick up the pace with that much time left to go. And if he does, he's really going to suffer for it if he's going to make his goal for today. We saw in that last lap, it looked like he was fine, although he was coming inside the black line as opposed to going wide. So in theory, that could, in fact, help him save a little distance, although wobbling like that can be distracting as well. And as I mentioned, there are those blue sponges that mark the out of bounds, and Martin's dynamic position. That's never what you want to have to do, especially with only 37 minutes down in the race. Maybe he has some discomfort, needed to have just a little respite from that to his aerodynamic position. But this isn't the kind of race where you want to be getting up and standing up and sprinting out of every corner. So I'd hope that we don't see a whole lot more of that. But it can in fact be pretty physically uncomfortable, as you can imagine. And more uncomfortable even than a similarly distanced road time trial, where you might have opportunities and that'll get out of the aero bars as appropriate, and a climb certainly to change gears, which you can't do here on the track, where a track bike with no brakes and no gears. So what you see is what you get, and he doesn't have a choice of picking up cadence to adjust to how his muscles are feeling at the moment. If he slows down his cadence, all that means is that he slows down. Not only does that make you go slower, but it's really hard to pick it back up once you've slowed down, especially if you're riding a 60 by 14 gear, which is relatively large as track gearing goes. At his goal pace, a cadence of a little over 100, which he's decided is optimal for experience in training and in his prior attempts. I'm getting some reports from trackside about his overall average speed, 53.3, and lap speeds, which are in the 54:20 range. As you recall, these a record of 54.526. Off his pace for both the lap speed and the his laps ideally should be 50. Oh, there he is out of the saddle again. That gets him some excited by that, but it's not time to sprint with almost 20 minutes. But this is the time when Martin said he would be thinking picking up the pace if he needs. So it'll be interesting to see where his lap time. me tell you a little bit about this. It looks gorgeous right now, super clean, long scheduled resurfacing at finishing that resurfacing and getting. Nonetheless, it f's up the track a little more, a ton of sawdust. So despite dust off the track, I think it's safe to really not at its very right now. It gets a little up of use at its very fastest. His most recent lap was 54.15. So they're slowing down just slightly, not picking it up as he needs to get back on pace. Sometimes on our journey around the track, you'll see the signs signifying some of the sponsors that have supported Martin, in addition to our timing sponsor, Tissot. BHS Logistics, one of his title sponsors. Ole Omberg, another title sponsor. Ceramic Speed, provider of ceramic bearings and other fast components. Martin also wanted to send special thanks to his assistant director sportif, Simon, his coach, Frank Jacobsen, Matt Severinsen, a mechanic from the Danish Federation who's been helping him with his track bike setup and testing, Mariah Erming from the Danish National Cycling Federation who's been helping him with his contacts with the UCI. He also wants to help my husband, Rob Van Houweling, who, based on our experience here at the track at Aguascalientes, for which Rob has done the lion's share of the logistical work, Martin has picked his brain about all of that, and Rob has been on hand. Uh-oh, we see Martin going clear of his line and getting out of the saddle again. Not a sign to me that he's feeling at his best, but maybe that'll help him get a little relief from the muscles that are suffering the most, or the surfaces that are suffering the most, and pick it up in these last 16 minutes, which is what he wants to do. Unfortunately, I see his most recent lap time of 54.1 is continuing to fall off the pace just slightly. See the look on Frank's face. Looking stoic, I'd say, at this point. Showing a total average of 52.9, which is well short of his goal on the day. I just mentioned Ceramic Speed. They provide the wheel bearings and bottom bracket, which are combined with an 11-speed UFO racing chain from Shimano. They'll be paired with chain rings and cogs from Capstein. I think I mentioned that Walker Brothers has supplied those disc wheels. And the frame, as you saw at the start, is an Argon 18. Both Argon 18 and Ceramic Speed are partners of the Danish National Cycling Federation. That racing chain is a fast and fancy one, not to be taken out on your normal training ride. By the time he's done, it will have been ridden for about 405 kilometers. He's ridden it about 350 kilometers so far, and he wanted to know before going out today whether it was safe to keep using it, whether it had some more kilometers in it, and his advisors said that yes, he could, that the treatment on it that doesn't last forever would last for about 100 more kilometers. Martin this morning said that he was pretty sure that he'd do only 55. He's not quite on pace to do that yet, with less than 15 minutes to go. His most recent lap speed was 54.05. Still off of his goal laps and slowing down a little bit. He's out of the saddle again. Looks like he's suffering. That's one of the most painful things about an hour record. And I've done attempts at the US hour record in advance of my attempt on the UCI hour record, and some of my attempts went better than others, although they were all successful in their own way. But the ones in which I paced them the most poorly, I found they were the most difficult both physically and psychologically. You find it just gets harder and harder as you keep going slower and slower. Going slower doesn't make it any easier, and hurting more sometimes doesn't make it go any faster. Here he is out of the saddle again. Not looking at his aerodynamic best with the kind of focus that we saw at the beginning of the attempt. Now, I mentioned Eddy Merckx as one of the famous riders who was the holder of this hour record. There are a couple different kinds of riders who do the hour record. There are specialists like Graham O'Brien, and those like Ole Ritter, who, while not specialists, are willing to try it again and again in an attempt to break and retake the record. Eddy Merckx, by contrast, said it was the hardest thing he'd ever done and he would never do it again. I wondered what type of rider Martin is, and it's clear that he's the specialist. He's determined. He's already the Danish hour record holder doing this attempt today, and he told me last night that he might consider going back and doing another attempt back home in Denmark, especially if he makes some more gains in equipment and training and feels confident at an attempt back at sea level as opposed to here with the advantages of altitude. Now, speaking of the advantages of altitude, some think it's an unfair advantage to do an hour record like this at a high altitude track like Aguascalientes. Martin and I certainly don't feel that way, having both done our attempts here, and we're not alone, as you've heard. The history of the hour record, including from Eddy Merckx and Ole Ritter and Francesco Moser and Jeannie Longo and Leontine von Morsel, who held the record when I broke it, they all include attempts here in the high altitude of Mexico. So it's certainly part of the tradition and something that riders from around the world have done as part of their attempt to optimize every feature. Oh, we just saw Martin hit one of those sponges that marks the out of bounds. That the sponges serve as their own deterrent. I don't think he would be disqualified for that kind of mishap, but it does distract and potentially slow him down. They're also distracting and a little unnerving to some riders, but as you just saw there, it's not dangerous to hit one. It doesn't seem to have disrupted his flow much. If they fly far out of the way, the officials will often step up while Martin is on the other side of the track and put them back into place. His most recent lap speed, 51.9. So Martin continues to fall off the pace here in the final quarter of his hour record attempt, although the last lap at 52.5 was picking it up closer to goal pace, but still not where he wants to be for his goal, and certainly not what he would want to do to get back on his schedule for his attempt today. So this will undoubtedly be a painful finish for Martin, but he is bravely finishing it out, getting experience for what I suspect will be more record attempts in his future. There he is out of the saddle again. We've been observing Martin's excellent aerodynamic position. He tells me that he did most of the fiddling with his position not in preparation for this hour record on the track, but instead as he was optimizing his road time trial position, which, as I mentioned, has brought him 3 Danish national time trial championships, in addition to a victory at the Chrono des Nations, excellent results at the World Championship. He optimized it using mostly field testing on the road using what's known as the Chung Method, named after its originator, Robert Chung of Berkeley, California. I've mentioned him already in the broadcast. He uses that along with some open source software called Golden Cheetah to crunch all the variables and figure out what choices are the best for both his aerodynamics and, of course, his ability to produce power. He says he hasn't changed much from his road position to his track position. He's done some testing that helped to confirm the choices that he'd made on the road. And most of the tweaks that he's made for the track have been tweaks to his equipment. Now, there he is again, sacrificing that aerodynamic position to get a little relief, maybe a little change up in the muscles he's using, a little relief for the saddle area. Martin is a relatively small rider, 1.84 meters tall, weighs 68 kilograms. That undoubtedly contributes to some of his aerodynamic advantages. This undoubtedly will take a lot out of Martin, but he'll be back at it on Thursday at the Tour of Denmark. His other upcoming races include the upcoming Time Trial World Championship in Innsbruck. He's getting a nice reaction from the crowd here with 7 minutes left in his effort. And he's picking up the pace a little bit from what we'd seen before, most recently 52.2 kilometer lap speed. What you see there on the screen, the black number, I believe that is his average speed now for the effort. That's accurate. He's significantly above his own record pace of 52.324, which is the Danish national record, as well as his own personal best. I think he's on course to break that here today and set a new mark for himself on what I suspect will be a path to return to the UCI Hour Record. Picking it up to 52.9 in his most recent lap. And Frank's timing there on the iPad reflects an overall average of 53.78. So a little faster than what you see there on the screen. By the end, we'll, of course, get confirmation not of the, well, of both the average speed and the total distance over the hour for Martin today. That will, of course, be calculated based on where he is on the track at the exact moment when the hour ends, when I suspect we will hear a gunfire to signal the end of the hour. But Martin will complete that lap because the way the timers calculate the speed for that final partial lap is as a percentage of the final lap speed. So it's something to remember as a racer that you have to, despite your exhaustion and potential jubilation, you have to go ahead and finish that last lap as quickly as you can to get credit for as much speed as possible. Most recent report is a lap speed of 52.4 and an average of 53.73 with 4 minutes now to go. And the crowd continues to give an enthusiastic reception to Martin every time he comes around the grandstand. 202 laps down. He would need just over 218 laps of the track to break the record. His average now 53.7, according to the trackside timing reports that I'm getting. Let me tell you what's up next for the UCI Hour Record. Dion Boykeboom from the Netherlands is a 29-year-old who will be next attempting the men's UCI Hour Record right here in Aguascalientes. And Vittoria Bussi from Italy, a 31-year-old, will be returning to Aguascalientes in September for the next attempt on the record after that. On the women's side, Vittoria made an attempt here in Aguascalientes last October where she clocked 47.576 kilometers, just 400 meters, less than 2 laps fewer than the world record of Evelyn Stevens. So Vittoria is obviously another one of those riders who's game to give it another go, to learn from her experience here in Aguascalientes and see what she can do on her second attempt. I know she has also been training at altitude in Italy, as well as making several trips here to Aguascalientes. So we'll look forward to watching both Dion and Vittoria make their attempts coming up, thanks to the UCI and the Velodromo Bicentenario here in Aguascalientes, Mexico. Average now 53.65 according to the experts at trackside, and most recent lap 51.8, and he has about 90 seconds to go. So just a few laps remaining here for Martin Toft Madsen, attempting the UCI Hour Record, which appears to be out of reach on this attempt, but the Danish national record has been broken as Martin is the holder of that record and will proudly continue to do that, and I predict be back for another attempt on the UCI Hour Record. Forty seconds to go. This is a nice, brave effort by Martin Toft Madsen. Picking it up a little bit here in these final laps. Clear he didn't have a lot left to give, but is giving everything he has. He got the bell for the final lap. He'll get the gun here in a few seconds. It's a whistle this time, and as I said, he will complete the lap so they can calculate his exact distance. And there he is with, I saw, 213 laps. So just 5 laps short of his goal, well in excess of his Danish record and personal best, and a brave, strong effort from Martin Toft Madsen at the UCI Hour Record. And he's getting a very nice ovation from the crowd here in Aguascalientes. And trackside is reporting unofficially that his average speed overall 53.63. So it was an hour. So that makes 53.63 kilometers for the hour record attempt of Martin Toft Madsen from Denmark. He gives an exhausted wave to the crowd as he brings down his speed here, gets ready to pull off the track. We've seen in previous hour attempts, some riders need to be helped off their bikes. Let's see how Martin finishes out today's effort. Another nice ovation as he comes by the fans again, and a little more energy in the wave, I'd say, that time as he recovers a little bit from that humongous effort. As an engineer and time trial specialist, I know that Martin takes pride in controlling every element of the race that he can, and he did that today. Some elements remain outside of his control. I'd say the atmospheric conditions here, where it's clouded over again and is not as hot as he had expected, are not ideal for an attempt today. Oh, and a real ovation now that he's stepped off of his bike without too much help from Simon and Frank there. I bet he's looking for a chair. They should have one closer to trackside for him. I bet he's already talking to Simon about what they can tweak for next time. Okay, here we go. Finally, a seat for Martin Toft Madsen. There with the Danish film crew. I think they'll be doing an interview. Oh, as he cools down there on his trainer set up right in the press area for him, where he's got Simon and Frank there for a debrief.
Martin Toft.
And we're going to hear the Danish commentary
Den skuffelse,
for those
der
who
må
speak
gå igennem
Danish.
dit hoved. Kan du ikke alligevel prøve at sætte nogle ord på, hvad det er, du præcis føler lige nu, her hvor din timerekord mislykkes?
Lige nu er jeg bare glad for, at det er forbi. Jeg ved ikke lige præcis, hvad jeg må lige se, om jeg kan tænke over, hvad der ikke lige går efter planen, men jeg kan mærke det efter 20-30 minutter, der kan jeg godt mærke, at det ikke lige er helt så nemt mere. Og så er der ikke rigtig andet for, end specielt heroppe i højden, så slår den altså hårdt, når man lige kommer over syregrænsen. Så er jeg nødt til at tage lidt af farten der i anden halvdel. Der er ikke så meget andet at gøre jo. Og så tænker jeg, at så må jeg jo køre det bedste jeg kan for trods alt at sætte så god tid som muligt. Som jeg godt kan se, det blev svært at slå den. Det skal jeg selvfølgelig lige hjem og sunde mig lidt på, men jeg har stadig ikke fortrudt, at jeg har gjort forsøget. Det gik da heller ikke helt galt. Der er der nogen, der er gået mere ned, ved jeg, når de har kørt sådan en timerekord. Så lige nu er jeg først og glad for, at benene lige kan få en pause, og jeg trods alt kom igennem med en hæderlig distance, trods alt. Skal jeg lige have pulsen ned, tror jeg, for jeg tænker lidt mere over det.
Du lægger ellers ud i et rasende tempo og er foran tidssplitten i de første 20 minutter. Lægger du simpelthen for hårdt ud?
Ja, det gør jeg så i dag, men altså, jeg er jo nødt til at køre hurtigere end rekorden, ellers så slår jeg den jo ikke, og jeg kommer ikke herover for at køre 100 meter kortere, så jeg fortryder ikke, at jeg er lavet på det, for det er jeg jo nødt til. Jeg kunne nok godt have kørt lidt længere i dag, hvis jeg havde startet lidt langsommere, men jeg havde stadig ikke slået rekorden. Så kan man sige, om jeg ikke slår den med 300 meter eller med 700 meter, eller hvad det bliver det. Ja, det er lidt underordnet. Jeg er nødt til at satse lidt selvfølgelig, og lægge ud på det jeg sådan havde planlagt, ikke? Som var en lille smule over rekordpace, og så måtte det jo så briste eller bære, og så bar det så ikke hele vejen igennem i dag, desværre. Men jeg har i hvert fald lært en masse, det er helt sikkert.
Jamen, og Martin, her til sidst, man kan sige, at du kom over, du sagde det selv, med målet om at slå den her timerekord. Hvad tager du alligevel med gennem den her rejse, du har været på?
Jamen, jeg tager en hel masse, kan man sige, med i form af al den træning, jeg har gjort op til at lære banen herover at kende, og selvfølgelig lære generelt en masse mere om at køre en time. Nu ser det desværre ud, som om min cykelcomputer går ud, så det er lidt ærgerligt, at jeg ikke har data, så kunne jeg lidt bedre se måske, hvad der går galt, men jeg skal hjem, og så må jeg jo lige se på på splitten. Måske er lidt data fra starten, så jeg i hvert fald kan sjuse mig frem til, hvad jeg har trådt. Jeg må lige se, om det er varme, eller det kan være mange ting, ikke? Men det må jeg lige hjem og prøve at se, om jeg kan finde ud af, hvad der ikke lige gik helt optimalt i dag, eller om det simpelthen bare skal i lidt bedre form. Men ja.
Jeg hører fra Simon Dam, og jeg kan også høre hjemme i studiet, Rasmus Kvade nævner, du er oppe og stå et par gange. Kan du ikke prøve at tage os igennem, hvad der foregår der? Det mener de ikke er kendetegnende dig?
Nej, men det er jo fordi, jeg har mærket, at jeg ligger over grænsen, og så begynder det altså at gøre ondt i benene. Og så er jeg nødt til simpelthen, man får en lille pause, når man står op. Jeg er simpelthen nødt til at smide nogle pauser ind, kan man sige. Både til benene, der lige bliver strakt, og oven i hovedet. Så jeg er simpelthen nødt til lige at hver 5. minut eller sådan noget, lige stå op. Og så tæller jeg ned igen. Og så siger jeg, nu holder jeg det lige 5 minutter eller 3 minutter til. Så kan jeg lige holde den der, og så må jeg lige op og stå igen for at få en pause. Det er jo simpelthen, fordi man ligger helt op på grænsen. Og lige skal have en pause, både i benene og op i hovedet.
We can now see Martin continuing to talk with animation and get a nice embrace from his coach Frank and director sportif Simon here at trackside in Aguascalientes, where he far exceeded his Danish national hour record but came short of the UCI World Hour Record of Brad Wiggins on his first attempt on that storied record. Reports from trackside say he didn't make any mistakes, just fell a little short in this attempt. And as I predicted during the attempt, I bet he'll be back to try again.
Det er også der, den plejer at blive hård, og det bliver den så også i dag. Og så kan jeg godt se, så er jeg simpelthen nødt til at sætte farten lidt ned, fordi jeg kan godt mærke, at det holder jeg ikke rigtig, det er fuldstændig. Og så er det klart, at indtil måske 30-35 minutter, der håber jeg lidt, at jeg måske kommer en lille smule igen. Men jeg kan mærke, hver gang jeg lige prøver at sætte farten op igen, så slår den bare hårdt lige med det samme. Så, altså, så er der ikke rigtig så meget at gøre, så må jeg kører jeg bare lige at kan de sidste halve time der, og så kører på den nye danske rekord, og verdens næstbedste tid for sig stadigvæk, så det er ikke helt forfærdeligt, men det er klart, at jeg har sat næsten op efter noget mere, men jeg har absolut ikke forstået, at jeg har gjort på det, jeg havde forstået, at jeg ikke har prøvet det helt.
Ja, og du er også selv inde på det, og der er også nævnt hjemme, at du er ret meget og du er oppe og stå på gange. Er det sådan en slutgrænse, du når, eller kan du så få igennem det?
Ja, det er klart, når man har siddet der, så lige har siddet lidt over grænsen. Og specielt det er den låste position, man har herinde på banen, hvor der er ikke nogen pause, så begynder det at gøre rigtig ondt i benene og musklerne. Og også mentalt selvfølgelig er det super hårdt, når man ligger der og fejler.
So Martin Toft Madsen was on his schedule, riding a disciplined race in all ways during about the first half of his attempt here, before falling little by little off of the pace in the second half, holding it together bravely, but not staying on the schedule he needed to beat Brad Wiggins' hour record. He did beat his own Danish national record. With an unofficial distance of 53.63 kilometers. His previous Danish national record, set in January at the Bellerup Super Arena Velodrome, was 52.324. So beat his own Danish record by over a kilometer here at the super fast Velodromo Bicentenario in Aguascalientes. He's cooling down, talking to the Danish press, preparing for the Tour of Denmark on Thursday. And then in September, the World Time Trial Championship in Innsbruck.
Lige her til sidst, Martin Toft. Du er jo om nogen, kan man sige, synonym med den her timerekord og tidskørsel i dansk cykling. Er det helt udelukket, at du vil gøre et forsøg mere på at få fingrene i den her?
Nej, det er det ikke. Som jeg sagde før, så er der jo nogle ting, der stadig kan forbedres, og måske kan jeg komme i lidt bedre form, finde lidt på udstyret og ændre lidt på træningen op til. Måske skal man lige have en uge mere højde inden. Det må jeg lige se på, når jeg kommer hjem, og så lave nogle tests, når jeg kommer hjem, og prøve at se, om finde ud af, hvad der kan gøres bedre. Så man kan sige, specielt når man gør sådan noget her første gang, så er det sjældent, at alle forløb er 100%. Jeg synes, det er forløbet ganske godt, og som jeg sagde i går, det har ikke været en dårlig optakt overhovedet, men selvfølgelig kan der finpudses, så jeg skal selvfølgelig lige hjem og sunde mig, og så er det ikke umuligt at gøre et forsøg igen på et tidspunkt. Det bliver nok ikke lige inden for den næste måned, det skal man lige mentalt om på. Men det er absolut ikke udelukket.
Tak skal du have.
Tak.
And now we have the official distance of 53.619 kilometers. Well in excess of the Danish hour record of 52.324 kilometers,
Super hard.
but short of his goal. Oh, let's listen to him in English now.
I did what I could, and you can of course see on my splits that I start out too hard, but I had to start out like that because there's no reason pacing after just being